Have you ever wondered how anyone can make nutrition recommendations for ME/CFS or long COVID when there's almost no direct research on it? I get asked this all the time, and it's a fair question because the truth is, if you go digging through PubMed, you won't find dozens of large scale clinical trials on diet for post-viral conditions. In fact, you'll barely find anything at all. So, how do we know what to eat? How do we decide which nutrients matter most? And what do I, as a post viral nutrition expert, base my recommendations on? The answer is more surprising and simple than most people realize. Let's start with an uncomfortable reality. Nutrition research for post viral illness almost doesn't exist. And frankly, it probably never will. Why is that? There are three main reasons. First, funding for these conditions is already abysmal. ME/CFS research receives a fraction of the research dollars that other chronic diseases do, and high quality nutrition research is extremely costly, and it's difficult to perform. It's hard enough to get basic science funding, much less nutrition funding. Then there's the complexity of the condition. These conditions are heterogeneous, so large controlled studies are nearly impossible. Post-viral illness may not be just one condition, it's dozens of overlapping syndromes under one umbrella. Not to mention the fact that there still isn't one standard research definition for ME/CFS. And time is also a factor. High quality nutrition research means following people for years or decades, and no one's investing in that for this patient population. It's also highly impractical for a patient group that has severe levels of disability and would be unlikely to complete such a study. So, if we wait around for perfect disease specific dietary studies, we'll be waiting a long time, probably forever. But that doesn't mean we're flying blind, because there's one field that does have decades of robust data on how nutrition shapes biology, and it just happens to mirror post viral illness more closely than you might think. Here's the key concept: ME/CFS and post viral conditions behave biologically like aging. Now, this isn't a metaphor, this is happening at a cellular and molecular level. If you want a deeper dive into the science and why researchers are starting to call these illnesses aging phenotypes, watch my earlier video on that topic. It sets the stage for everything we're going to talk about here. Here's a quick recap. In post-viral conditions, we see mitochondrial dysfunction, the same decline in energy metabolism you'd expect in someone decades older. We see chronic low-grade inflammation, sometimes called inflammaging, and we see immune senescence, where the immune system becomes sluggish and dysregulated. We also see muscle loss and shortened telomeres. These are the same hallmarks you'd see if you studied an elderly population. The difference is, in ME/CFS and other post-viral conditions, they're happening decades too early. And that's why aging science is so powerful here, because we don't need to reinvent the wheel already exists. We already know a lot about how nutrition affects muscle loss, mitochondrial function, immune resilience, and gut integrity in older adults. And those are exactly the systems that are most disrupted in post-viral illness. Now, at this point, you might be thinking, wait, are you saying we should eat like we're 80? Well, maybe. What works for aging bodies is often what works best for post-viral bodies. And ignoring that connection is one of the biggest mistakes I see people make. For example, take protein. One of the most consistent findings in geriatric nutrition is that protein needs rise with age, sometimes nearly double what's recommended for a healthy adult. Why is that? Because older bodies become less efficient at maintaining muscle mass. Now, that might sound familiar. Many of those with ME/CFS, especially the most severe forms, lose muscle rapidly due to inactivity and also mitochondrial dysfunction. And that same research can directly inform how you approach protein recommendations in these illnesses. Or consider micronutrients. We know older adults are more prone to deficiencies in vitamin D, B12, magnesium, and potassium, all nutrients tied to fatigue, immune balance, and neurological health. That's not a coincidence. Those deficiencies are also common in post-viral conditions. Even caloric restriction research, like the landmark calorie trial, gives us valuable insights. It shows how moderate calorie reduction reduces inflammation and slows biological aging. In a post-viral context, that tells us a lot about how strategic fasting or energy intake could change the disease processes, though it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. If you want to learn more about how fasting and caloric restriction specifically influence mitochondrial function and inflammation, there's a separate video I've made on that breaking it down, and I'll link it in the description below. And finally, gut health. Aging research has shown us for decades how fiber, short chain fatty acids, and microbial diversity protect the gut barrier and the immune system. And every one of these findings applies directly to the gut dysfunction we see in post-viral illness. So that's the philosophy behind all of my nutrition work, and it's exactly how I teach in my online courses. I walk you through diet and nutrition recommendations for post-viral illness, step by step, from mitochondrial support to gut health, so you can make sense of the conflicting advice and build a plan that's based on the biology of these unique conditions, not with trends or with buzzwords. The bottom line is this: there may never be randomized nutrition trials for ME/CFS or post-viral conditions, but that doesn't mean we're without evidence. Aging research has already done the heavy lifting. It gives us decades of data on how diet influences the exact systems that are disrupted in post-viral illness. So the next time you hear someone say there's no research, remember there's more evidence than you think. We just have to know where to look. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Are there nutrition strategies that you've tried that seem to make a difference? And if you learned something from this video, please hit that like button. It helps other people see it and they can learn something new as well. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.